Aloha, beautiful people. Hello and welcome to another episode of Touchful Podcast. My name is Magdalena, and in this podcast, I talk about touchful life, living in touch with yourself, with the whole world, with other people, with your emotions, with your desires, living in touch with the world in integrity and with open heart. And the topic of today's episode came to me in a quite interesting way. So I was sharing something on Instagram. I was making a story. And a part of that story that I was sharing was me processing some of my emotions, which happened earlier today, this morning. And then there was this one sentence that I put in the Insta story, and that sentence was, "Life is not a game of avoidance." And as soon as I posted that story, I thought to myself, wow, this is something that I want to talk more about. This is something that needs elaboration and further explanation. And also I want to just put it in a podcast, which is my favorite way of connecting, one of my favorite ways of connecting with you. And also because I don't care that much about Instagram, so it's like literally 5 people watching my stories. Well, it's a little bit more listening to the podcast. So I thought I would use the opportunity today to talk with you a little bit more about that, or a lot more about that, what I mean by this, what is a game of avoidance, and what I mean by saying that life is not a game of avoidance. So yeah, that's what today's episode is going to be about. I'm gonna make myself comfortable. I'm gonna have a sip of water, and I will maybe start by telling you a little bit more, just giving you a little bit more of a background why I shared that sentence today on Instagram in the first place and what happened. So I woke up this morning feeling like, I called it like a mild panic inside, this sort of like a bubbly feeling, something a little bit uncomfortable, something that I could easily push away and I could easily ignore, and I could easily just throw myself into everyday things and just kind of like almost forget that that feeling was there. But it was this little nagging feeling it didn't make me feel good. So what I did, instead of pretending that it was not there, I started to process it. I started to process that emotion. I started to work with it. And I have different kinds of ways of accessing my emotions on a deeper level and releasing them, seeing them, letting them go, letting them through, alchemizing them, whatever you want to say. And one of the easiest ways for me is movement. So I started with the movement that brought some tears. So I cried a little. I went into meditation, I went into journaling, I had a very deep and meaningful and vulnerable and at some moments difficult and at some moments very loving conversation with a person who is dear to me and with a person who was a part of all that story that brought up these emotions. I'm just saying you in a very like a telegraphic way of what I did, because that's not the episode today for me to dive deeper into how I process my emotions. But anyhow, the result was that I could feel that that emotion went through, and what I was left with was something that I call the diamond, or the treasure, the gift of that emotion, the expansion that I could feel. And that was a moment when I felt so grateful to myself that I didn't avoid going there, going deep into myself, sitting with myself, meditating with myself, moving my body, journaling, opening up in a vulnerable conversation, that I didn't avoid this, but I'd rather chose to went through this, and I ended up growing and expanding. And that's when this sentence came to me, that life is not a game of avoidance. And I realized that for most of my life, I was playing that game of avoidance on different levels. starting with emotions, but also so avoiding emotions, avoiding confrontation, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding all kinds of things that would put me in any level of discomfort. I would construct my life in a way that would allow me to avoid all this as much as possible. And I want to tell you what the consequences of that were for me and how my life looks now when I stopped playing the game of avoidance. And I will start with emotions, since that's how the story started for me today, with releasing and processing these emotions in the morning. So when I think about my life, like my teenage years or my early 20s, even my late 20s up to my early 30s, I would say. So just a couple of years back when things really shifted for me. But definitely in my 20s, I would avoid difficult feelings and difficult emotions. And I'm making an air quote right now with my fingers because I really don't like this word, difficult emotions, difficult feelings. I'm trying to find another way of naming them. And what I mean by these difficult, again, air quoting, feelings is everything that would make me feel uncomfortable, everything that would make me feel like I'm being triggered, like I'm being pulled out, and everything that pulled out of this famous thing called comfort zone, everything that would make me kind of like contract and hide, all these kinds of emotions. So very often it would be sadness, jealousy a lot, disappointment, anger, grief, all kinds of these emotions that would be uncomfortable to feel, would be difficult for me to feel. I would avoid them. And I think that I often try to avoid generalization, but I kind of feel that it's really safe to generalize now that majority of world's population does the same thing. We play the game of avoidance. So I would avoid putting myself in a situation that would make me feel all these feelings. Or sometimes when I would start feeling them, like I would start to feel jealousy or resentment or disappointment or irritation, I would push it away. I would try to kill it. I would try to make it disappear. So I would engage myself in all kinds of activities, these sort of numbing activities that would allow me not to deal with that emotion that I was feeling, not to process it, not to feel it, not to let it through. And I'm sure that when you think about you and your life, you can think about all kinds of things that you do, not because you really want to do them, but because they allow you to run away from yourself. And there is no shame in that. We all do that. I still do that. My number one thing when I want to run away from myself, especially from my feeling overwhelmed or very tired or stressed, is dumb scrolling. It used to be a lot with overeating, but I have dealt with that. But now I see that my number one thing is just doom scrolling. So we all do these things, and there's no shame in that as long as we are aware of that and we see this as an invitation to meet ourselves in truth. So I would do all kinds of these things. And the truth is that, and this is like super important, and I wish somebody told me that, or somebody showed me that, somebody explained that to me, somebody coached me on that, because it's super important and I didn't know that. But the truth is that when you try to avoid feeling this quote-unquote difficult feelings, so you numb yourself, you shut yourself off to feeling sadness or anger or disappointment or resentment or grief or whatever comes, then you are inevitably, it always happens that you also limit or completely close off your ability to feel these quote unquote positive emotions or good emotions, these things that we want to feel, these feelings that we live for, they make us feel alive. So love, connection, gratitude, appreciation, awe, amusement, joy, all these beautiful, uplifting feelings. Because the truth is that you cannot choose that, okay, I'm not gonna feel that, I'm just gonna numb myself to that, I'm gonna ignore that, I'm gonna pretend that this part doesn't exist, but I still want to have the good part. It doesn't work like this. Imagine emotions like a water tap. So when the tap is open, the water is flowing, and these are the emotions. Emotion, energy in motion, some people call it like this. They flow. But you cannot just close the tap to the difficult emotions. When you close it off, they stop flowing, or the flow of water, you can just, make it a little less, but then the flow of water, all the water, is just a little less. So in effect, you feel a little less. You feel a little less pain and sadness and disappointment, but you also feel a little less love and excitement and just this joy and gratitude for life. And like I said, I wished somebody told me that, or helped me go through that and understand that, because it took me years to feel that and to understand how it works, that by playing the game of avoidance, by avoiding meeting myself and holding myself through all these quote-unquote difficult feelings, I just inevitably close myself to the flow of life itself. So the moment you try to, I'm trying to use different words to convey that message, because I find it so super important. At least it changed my life. The moment you try to avoid meeting yourself in truth in difficult moments with emotions that are not so comfortable, you close yourself off to being fully and deeply and truly alive. That's how I see it. That's how I feel it works. That's how it works for me. That's what I see in my Lomi clients, especially those who are with me for a longer time in a long-term Lomi therapy. And when we access some of the emotions through the body, it's you are able to access and process and feel your deepest sorrow and resentment or abandonment. And that also opens you up to feeling alive like never before, feeling the love like you have never felt it before, feeling the joy and the gratitude of being alive like you never felt it before. That's why my mantra, something that I share often on this podcast, is touch the world and let the world touch you. Let the world touch you with everything. Open up to life as wide as you can. Because, and here's the other thing I wish somebody told me, is that it is safe to feel all the emotions. It is safe, and it is okay, and it is normal. It is safe, and it is okay, and it is normal, and you are meant for that. Your nervous system, my nervous system, our bodies, how we operate, how we function, we are not meant to store the emotions inside. We are not meant to push them away. Physically, literally, our nervous system, our body is not meant for that. We are really not good at it. Our bodies are not good at storing emotions. That's why when you deal with some unresolved emotions, when you deal with some deep trauma, and emotion, like trauma, of course, comes with huge emotional load attached to it. That's why it's a trauma. When you deal with something that is repressed, when you deal with something that you don't want to see, and you don't want to process it, or you don't know how to process it, you don't have the capacity at this moment to process it, or you don't even know that it's there because it's hidden. But because your body is not it's not made to store all this, then very often what happens is that the body starts to be physically sick in this way or another, having all kinds of physical symptoms, because our system is not designed as a storage space. You are not a storage space. You are a river. You are the tap that is supposed to be open. You are life itself. Your body, your nervous system is perfectly designed to let everything go through you, to let the emotions go through you, to let life move you, to let life live you, to let life touch you. And then the emotion just comes and goes. And sometimes it's a really short process. When you don't go into mental processing of emotions, when you don't process the thoughts, but you process the emotions, then sometimes this process is quite rapid and quite efficient. Like this morning, it took me maybe around 2 hours, maybe even less, of moving and crying and doing all kinds of practices. Maybe I will do another podcast episode about it. Plus, I think I already have one podcast episode about it, how I process my difficult feelings. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say is, number one thing, and if you play this game of avoidance, I'm gonna avoid difficult feelings, I'm gonna numb myself, I'm gonna pretend that they are not there, then you simply avoid life. You avoid full spectrum of life. And when I realized that, and when I felt with my whole being what it means, how it feels to be really alive, to be truly and deeply open, to have my heart open all the time. When I felt for the first time, I was like, whoa, I've never felt so alive before. And I will never, I never ever, I don't want anything less than this. I want to feel alive. I want to feel open. But the price tag that comes with it, everything comes with a price tag. The price tag for that, for being open, for being the river, for allowing my body to do what it is meant to do, and allowing my nervous system to do what it is meant to do, so just allowing the emotions go through, the price tag for that is that sometimes, or quite often, on a daily basis actually, I am being invited to process all kinds of things, all kinds of emotions, all kinds of sensations, all kinds of feelings. And I don't know how it sounds to you. Maybe it sounds like a horrible thing for you, but the truth is that it is really easy. Once you start to practice it, it is really easy. Once you start to understand how it feels when an emotion just moves through you, and you are not analyzing it, you are not ruminating on it, you are not thinking about feeling. That's a big problem. It used to be a big problem of mine, and I see it a lot in people, that instead of feeling, we think about feeling. But once you tap into the feeling, then it's very easy, because it's a natural thing. It's just the river of life, the movement of life, the flow of life moving through you. So to me, that is number one reason of not playing the avoidance game. It's not worth it. It's not worth it because avoiding the full spectrum of emotions means avoiding full spectrum of life. And I don't want that. Another thing that came to me was when I started to, kind of like dive into this topic and what it means, like what I mean by the game of avoidance, a story came to me, a memory. It was a couple of months ago. I had a very beautiful and deep conversation with a person very dear to my heart. And we were discussing some things, and he said something along these lines. He said something like, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want this to hurt you. And I remember that my initial reaction was that I don't understand what he means. So I told him, you can't hurt me. You can't hurt me. It is physically impossible for you to hurt me. It's not how it works. And then later on, when we came back to that conversation after a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and after we had been through some things together, I just realized that this is not exactly what I meant. That it is not true that you cannot hurt me. If I have a deep connection with somebody, of course that they might say something or they might do something that will feel hurtful to me. Forget deep connection with somebody, even sometimes with a stranger. Sometimes strangers, people who we don't know, or people in the internet, sometimes they say things or do things that feel hurtful. So I realized that I was wrong, or that it wasn't what I really meant when I said to him that you cannot hurt me. But still, there was some deep truth in it. So I started to feel into it and to feel into what I meant. Like, why the moment he told me, I don't want to hurt you, why this felt wrong, why this felt like something that I couldn't understand. And then I got it. And again, it is about the game of avoidance. That life, at least the way I feel it, the way I see it, and the way I want to live it, it's not about avoiding being hurt. Life is not about avoiding being hurt. You are going to get hurt when you are alive. That's the deal. If you are alive, if you're a human, you are going to get hurt multiple times. You are going to get heartbroken multiple times, probably. You are going to feel hurt, inevitably, because you're a human. And again, when I look back at my life, I would so very often take decisions based on probability of being hurt. I so much wanted to avoid hurt. And by hurt, I mean feeling rejected, being laughed at, being abandoned, being misunderstood, being criticized. So all this that feels hurtful. So I would live my life with a closed heart, and I would rather not pursue my dreams, not choose certain activities, not hang out with certain people, not take a risk. All of that based on my want and my need not to be hurt, not to feel the disappointment, the rejection. Until I understood that, again, that is playing the game of avoidance. And life is not a game of avoidance. And life is not about tiptoeing around things just to make sure that they don't hurt me. And let me make one thing super clear. I mean, it's clear to me, but I want to make sure that it's also clear to you. That, of course, as long as we are humans and we have empathy and we are kind and good-hearted people, it is perfectly okay to be thoughtful and reasonable and kind of make sure that my actions are aligned, that my actions come from the heart, and that I don't want to deliberately hurt somebody. I'm not talking about these kinds of situations because they do exist as well. That I'm sure that you know exactly what you should say or could say to your loved one to hurt them. You know what words would hurt them. And you don't say these words, or you word it differently because you don't want to deliberately hurt them. And that is a beautiful thing. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this kind of like tiptoeing and sort of like choosing my path and my decisions based on some fantasies or assumptions that if I do this, then maybe somebody will be hurt, or maybe I will be hurt, and I don't want that. And that is playing the game of avoidance. Because again, like I said, and I'm going to say it again, because I want this to sink in you, because I think that it is important truth. Just like I told you before, that it is okay and it is safe to feel all the emotions, and that you are meant for that. Your system is meant for that. Right now, I'm going to say, I'm going to be daring and say that it is okay to feel hurt. It is normal to feel hurt. And life is not about doing everything not to get hurt. It's literally impossible. And when you try to build your life like this, when you try to build your life around the concept of I'm not going to get hurt ever again, then you end up as you stop living. You maybe exist, you breathe, you walk, you talk, but you don't live anymore. You merely exist. One of these classic examples, I think, and hands up if you've been through that, and probably you had been through that, is this classic example of a broken heart. When I go into a relationship with all my heart, with all my love, and then I get hurt, I get heartbroken, and very often my initial reaction, especially in my 20s, would be, that's it. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than to feel that hurt. I don't want to feel that hurt ever again. I'd rather be alone. I hate men. I'm not going to go into a relationship ever again. You feel the closure? Do you feel how this closes me to the flow of life? Because it's not about avoiding hurt. It's about developing such big love and ability to hold yourself in every state, including hurt, that when you actually feel hurt, that you can go through it and you will be okay. And sometimes we are deeply hurt, and sometimes it even leaves scars on us, metaphorically, sometimes even physically. But I wished somebody told me, Magdalena, baby girl, don't close your heart. Don't try to avoid hurt in life, because that's a dead end. That's not going to lead you anywhere. Rather than putting all your energy into trying to avoid hurt and disappointment, take that energy and invest it into yourself, into building such a strong connection with yourself, into building such a deep conviction of, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what is important for me, I know that I can hold myself through everything, I know that I am invincible, and the more vulnerable I am, the more invincible I become. Invest the energy in that instead of trying to avoid hurt. Because even if you try to avoid hurt, you're gonna get hurt anyhow. Or you're just gonna live your life in the most miserable, disconnected way. And that is heartbreaking, to live a life like this. I'm gonna have a sip of water. A very kind of like a silly example, but actually a good one came to me. It's this podcast that I'm doing right now. You might know it or you might not know it, but I treat this podcast and recording all these episodes and sharing my thoughts with you, I take it kind of like a spiritual practice, a practice of expanding my consciousness, a practice of expanding my heart and expanding my ability to feel. And in so many ways, it would be easier not to do it, not to put myself through the stress of recording it, because it is stressful for me always, not to put myself through the risk of being criticized, not to touch the world. In so many ways, it would be just easier in a short term. But what this podcast is giving me, the expansion that I am experiencing, also meeting myself in truth, meeting my fears, meeting my insecurities that I experience every time I record, meeting myself in the truth of like, oh my goodness, I'm just rambling, and meeting my fear of being rejected, meeting myself in all this with every episode that I record. It's worth everything. And also all the sweet messages that I get, and knowing that just this one person got inspired by listening to what I'm sharing. It is worth everything. This is what I mean by touch the world and let the world touch you. By the way, I think I should do a whole podcast episode about it, like what this mantra means to me, what this practice means to me, because this is how I live my life and how I organize my life. So instead of avoiding to being heard, because you think that it's easier, at the end it's not easier. At the end it is really easier to meet yourself, to sit with yourself, to sit with the discomfort, to let life touch you, and to touch life with whatever you have for this world, with your art, with your words, with your dreams, with your project, with your ideas. And yes, sometimes it means that if you put yourself out there, sometimes you will get rejected. Sometimes you will get misunderstood. Sometimes you will be laughed at. Sometimes you will get hurt. Sometimes you will feel crazy jealous. Sometimes you will feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you will feel abandoned. Sometimes you will feel like there are all kinds of things inside you and you don't even know where to start because you feel like you're being just like torn apart from the inside. Sometimes it might feel like this. But when you put yourself out there, when you don't play the game of avoidance, then it means that also you're gonna meet so much love, so much compassion, beauty, connection beyond anything that you could ever imagine was possible. Magic, synchronicities, dreams coming true, brilliant people on your way, your heart expanding so much that it feels greater than the universe itself. It comes with a whole package. And the moment you stop playing the game of avoidance, you start playing the game of being fully, really alive. And at least for me, that's the only thing that I am interested in right now. Feeling alive, feeling inspired, feeling my heart opening up, feeling my body being vibrant, ecstatic even. And I will do whatever it takes to feel like this, to keep opening up to this, and if possible, to inspiring others to feel like this as well. I will do whatever it takes, because I don't like the alternative of merely existing. And then the third thing that comes to me, all these are connected, like avoiding emotions versus really processing them, avoiding the hurt versus really living your life fully and opening yourself to the full spectrum of everything. Another game of avoidance that I have been playing, and I think that's the last example of that I want to give you, is avoiding confrontation. Or confrontation is this strong word. I was even avoiding the word confrontation for my whole life. Avoiding honest conversations, sometimes difficult conversations, truthful conversations, bringing up things like naming the elephant in the room, I would say. And that was something that I would avoid. I would do anything not to have that difficult conversation, not to have that vulnerable talk, not to be clear about my boundaries, because that would mean that maybe somebody would feel discomfort. And again, we are coming to this fantasy and this illusion of like, oh my God, I don't want to hurt you. It is not your responsibility. It is my responsibility to navigate through my hurt. But what I'm trying to say is that I feel that I'm getting better and better in these difficult, vulnerable conversations. Because again, it is a practice. All this that I'm sharing, this is like, this is the great news. All this that I'm sharing right now, it is a practice. It is not like 0-1, either I know how to feel my feelings or I don't. Either I know how to live my life or I don't. Either I avoid hurt or I don't. All this is a practice. Literally like any kind of practice, like learning how to cook or how to lift weights. The more you do it, the better you become at it. It's exactly the same, no difference whatsoever in practicing how to feel your emotions, how to open your heart, how to live your life, not from the place of avoiding hurt, but from the place of meeting love. And it's the same with difficult conversations. It is a matter of practice. Communication is a skill to practice. And I realized that the more I put myself out there, the more I choose to have a serious talk with somebody, the easier it gets, the more natural it gets. So at the beginning, I would often have like a lump in my throat and tears coming to my eyes and my whole body just clenching and kind of like collapsing on itself almost. But the more I do it, the easier it becomes. Yes, it is uncomfortable to name the elephant in the room sometimes, to bring a difficult topic, to have that serious talk that you've been avoiding, to come from a vulnerable place. Yes, it is very often uncomfortable, it is very often difficult, and I often end up crying. But everything in life comes with a price tag. I want you to understand that everything in life comes with a price tag. When you avoid that difficult conversation, it has a price. And you're going to pay that price for avoiding that conversation. And the resentment that builds between you and that person, because you avoid naming the elephant in the room and having that vulnerable conversation, sharing something from the depth of your heart. If you avoid that, it has a price, and you're going to pay that price sooner or later. When you choose to have that conversation, to come from this vulnerable place, to practice it, to practice your communication skills, it has a price tag. And one of the price, one of the types of the price that you are paying is that you might feel uncomfortable, you might feel totally exposed, you put yourself at risk of being rejected. That is part of the price. But literally every single one of these deep, meaningful, truthful, vulnerable conversations that I had with people, they ended up expanding my heart and opening up my heart and my life to more love and more connection that I could ever imagine and that I ever knew was possible for me or for anybody. And again, I come to the same conclusion that this is the life that I want to create for myself. And if it means putting myself through discomfort, if it means sitting with this discomfort, if it means practicing my communication skills, if it means teaching myself how to approach the other person and this difficult conversation from the place of utmost love and compassion and openness, if it means navigating myself through the hurt or possible rejection, if it means sitting with my emotions, if it means crying, whatever it takes, I will do whatever it takes, because I want to feel alive, because I don't want to live my life playing the game of avoidance. Because again, avoiding truth, and ultimately very often these difficult conversations that we are avoiding, they are about truth. Avoiding truth means avoiding life. At least, again, I'm gonna keep repeating that, at least for me, at least the way I see it, the way I feel it, the way I practice it. And I don't want to avoid life because I have just one. I don't want to avoid being alive. And being alive is a full spectrum. And it is also a beautiful thing. I invite you to see it as a beautiful thing. That this full spectrum of emotions, full spectrum of experiences, that it is a beautiful thing. It is abundance in its purest form. Life is abundant in its purest form. And opening up to the full spectrum of life means opening up to abundance of life, means opening up to everything. And it is also okay if you feel that this doesn't resonate with you and it is not how you want to live your life. It is also okay. These are the choices that we make. And it's not that this is a good choice and this is a bad choice. This is my choice, that I want to live my life like this. And I want to get better and better in being alive and feeling everything, allowing everything to go through me, holding myself steadily through all the emotions, because I know that they all come and go. My emotions come and go. People come and go. Hurt comes and goes. Everything comes and goes. What stays is me, is my presence, is myself, is my life. And I want to create my life in the most beautiful way that I can. And I will do whatever it takes. And if I could leave you with one inspiration from today's episode, then it would be this: to ask yourself, where in your life are you playing the game of avoidance? Because we all do. And I know that there are some people in my life that I'm playing the game of avoidance with. I know that there are some situations that they are not objectively dangerous to me, but I avoid putting myself in these situations because they bring a certain level of discomfort, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. And that is also okay, as long as you are aware of that. So sit with yourself, sit with your human, and ask yourself, where am I avoiding life? Where am I closing off this tap with water so the life doesn't flow through me or as me fully and deeply and as it could? And a last final disclaimer that I want to make. Again, I feel that it's obvious, but way too many times it turned out that something that is obvious to me is not obvious to other people. So I want to make this one disclaimer, that it is very normal and very okay and very needed for us to avoid people or situations that we feel that put us in danger. That not playing the game of avoidance and playing the game of life instead doesn't mean that you need to put yourself in a situation that triggers your PTSD or something like this. This is or a situation that feels like it's dangerous for your health, mental health, physical health, emotional well-being, whatever. So if there are certain people that you avoid because they just bring too much hurt and then they just trigger you, or they just trigger your PTSD, or just, there's just too much, it's perfectly okay to avoid certain people, to avoid certain situations that you feel that you don't have capacity to deal with that right now, and maybe you never will have, and that is also okay. I have parts of my life like this as well, that I know that out of utmost love that I have for myself, utmost respect that I have for myself, and utmost compassion that I have for myself, I'm going to avoid these situations or these people. But I also know, when I'm deeply, truly honest with myself, that there are some people and some situations that I'm avoiding only because it just brings some level of discomfort, but in fact I could deal with that discomfort. I could go through it and that would expand me. And each time I choose to do that, I feel that it expands me. One of these silly examples that comes to my mind right now is speaking Icelandic. I think I shared it in one of the podcasts that I would love to do that more. And I know very well when I am playing this game of avoidance. And sort of like, I'm just going to organize my life in a way that I don't need to put myself through the discomfort of speaking Icelandic, because it brings a certain level of discomfort and some fear and some shyness and some rejection. And these are emotions that are difficult to deal with. But each time I do it, and recently I do it more and more, each time I do it, I feel that I have grown as a person. Not just that my Icelandic got better, but that I have grown as a person, because I met my fear, I met my insecurity, I held myself in this with grace and with compassion, and I grew as a person, regardless of the outcome of that conversation that I had in Icelandic. So what I'm trying to say as the last thing for today is that this is also a practice of navigating. What are the areas of my life where I'm playing the game of avoidance? And here's the keyword, the game of avoidance. I'm playing that game because I don't want to look there, even though I know that if I did, it could potentially expand my life. Versus which areas of my life I am avoiding, but I do it consciously. I'm not playing any game. I avoid these people or these situations or going deeper into this or that because I know that it might be too much for me right now, that maybe right now I don't have the capacity or the help needed to deal with something. And that is a certain level of mastery to navigate through that. And that is fascinating. That is what fascinates me about being alive. Contemplating life, navigating life, looking into different areas of my life, and just this is endless. This is endless, and this is what being alive means to me. And I think I'm gonna park it here. I feel so energized after this episode. And as always, I hope that I managed to convey my message in the most graceful and clear way that was possible for me at this very moment. I truly do hope that you take something out of today's episode, some little nugget of inspiration. If you want to send me a message, if you want to share something that this episode sparked in you, then you have my email address in the description of this episode. And I want to say thank you for you. Thank you for choosing to spend a moment of your life with me. It means a world. And right now, with a breath, my heart is connecting to your heart beyond time, beyond space, in this eternal now. So feel that right now we are in this together. Thank you for you. Keep living your life in the most beautiful way that is possible for you right now. Keep practicing, because life is a practice. And I will talk to you in another episode. Aloha. Bye-bye.